friend Dakota's coming too. Isn't it exciting to be able to help the little children in Africa? I so enjoyed hearing the stories. In fact, I got an email yesterday from Pastor Benson. Do you remember Pastor Benson who was here sharing with us from Africa? He told me that this week his children, who are now grown-up men, from a long time ago at the orphanage, all planned him a special welcome home from America. He got home back to Africa safe. And they all came, all 50 of them, with their wives and their children, and they all came, and it was a total big surprise to him. And they came this last week to surprise him and welcome him back home and thank him for all that he did in raising them to love Jesus and serve Jesus and be able to raise their families and provide food for their families. He was just so overjoyed at their gratitude and the special surprise they planned for him. Well, that's not the children's story, but that goes with your children's offering. All right. So on our way to church this morning, we were driving down the little winding mountain road, and it was covered with fresh snow, and it's a narrow gravel road, and it's very steep going down, and if you start sliding on the corners, it just kind of like goes off and drops off way down the mountain. And my husband and I were talking about this could be a scary drive, but it's not really scary to us anymore, and we were thinking about why it wasn't. Well, we're always happy that God leads us, and he helps us to feel secure in following his leading, right? And so we were recounting why it is that we still drive it very carefully and very slowly, but we're not so afraid of it anymore. And that's because God prepared us when we were first married. On our honeymoon, we went to Italy, and we went to the mountains. And it was late October, and so it was beginning to be winter. There was even some fresh snow in the mountains where we went in Italy, where the Waldensians would go up high into the mountains and hide so that they could be faithful to God and keep the commandments of God and follow the Bible. And so when we went there, when we were first married, we had a rented van, and we wanted to explore the caves and the trails where the Waldensians would run and hide, and that was high up in the mountains. And so we would try to drive as far as we could drive in the van. And those roads, they're nothing like anything you've ever driven in the United States. There wasn't more than maybe an inch or two to spare between you and the chasm below. Sometimes we even had to back up on those roads. And it was really scary. And so my husband told me this morning, that's why I'm not afraid of this road anymore, because it's so much better than what we did on our honeymoon. God was preparing us way back then to be okay living where we do in the mountains here in Washington. Well, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how God leads us. And you know, there's interesting ways that God leads us, and I was thinking about one of them. The path he leads us and how he prepares us for that path. Just like our honeymoon and driving in the mountains prepared us to be okay with driving our road here in Washington. Well, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up. And my husband woke up, and we had a busy week. It was Monday morning. We had a busy week in front of us, and we had just gotten a phone call. But my husband had been at work, and I had gotten the phone call, and I was supposed to tell him what the phone call said. And so I had prayed about it, and I just wasn't sure what he was going to say, but it was a big message that I needed to give him from the phone call. So he woke up, and I woke up, and I said my prayer. I said, I got to tell him, today's the deadline. They have to know an answer before the meeting tonight. And so he was awake. I said, we got a phone call, and we need to give them an answer. He's like, what? I said, we got a phone call from the Northern England Conference and from an elder there, and he is asking if you would be willing to be a pastor out there of churches. And the meeting is tonight, and we got to give them an answer if you're willing to be on the list. And I didn't know what he was going to say because it could change our lives forever. And so he didn't pause very long before he said, well, we've been praying for God to put us where he wants us to be in these end times. So why should we say no? we should be willing, shouldn't we, to go where God wants us to go? I'll go where you want me to go. I'll say what you want me to say. I'll be what you want me to say. Says, sure, we should tell them we're willing. We can be on the list. After all, we're number 5 out of already 4 on the list. What chance is there that we'll have to move? So, we were willing, and we were willing to go, and we are going. So you've all heard that news, haven't you? But what was interesting is how God prepared us to go. Well, some of the ways that he prepared us to go is that the church has said, we want someone who has a call to evangelism as our pastor. Well, God prepared teacher John to be an evangelist long ago. He traveled as an evangelist. So God was preparing him for what he's doing now, back then. Well, they said, we have a church school 2 miles from the church. We want a pastor and a wife and a family who has a burden for the mission of our church school. Well, you all know that my children and I worked at the church school here in Colville. And we took that on as our very special mission field. So God was preparing us for going there. And people said, oh, the worst part about moving to Maine is the snow, and it's cold, and it's in the north. Well, we already live with snow. We already live on a mountain. We already live with bad roads and cold. That's okay. God's already prepared us for that. And I could keep going through the list and the list and the list of all the things that God has done to prepare us in the past for his leading in the future. So you know what? Be faithful with what God calls you to do today, because it's what he's doing to prepare you for what he wants you to do tomorrow and when you get bigger. So be faithful where he's placed you today, because it's the best preparation for where God is taking you. And you don't know where that is, but follow his leading. You can go back to your seats.